We want to welcome everybody that is following us, watching us on YouTube. We say thank you. We appreciate that. As you know, if you've watched these before, you'll have a little thing pop up. If you want to partner with us as far as giving, it gives you our website address. You can go there. I'll put a link in the description to our website as well. If you would like to give, much appreciated. We're just a small church trying to make a big difference in the kingdom of God. And we also, popping up here, you'll see one for YouTube. You can subscribe to that and hit your little bell, and it'll let you have all of the sermons and things that we may post to come to your notifications. And then also on Facebook, we also are placing that in there so you can see where you can follow us on Facebook. We encourage you to chime in, let us know you're there, and we just like loving on people. And so that's what we do here. We're all about leading, loving, and doing life together. So once again, we thank you for joining us today. So on this Father's Day, I'm starting a series. It's going to be a series, but we're going to start it on Father's Day anyway, that deals with the biblical approach of family and the power that it has. In the past, I've done sermons and different teachings and things on family, but to be honest with you, since I've been here, I haven't. And so I thought, you know, on this Father's Day, and the Lord just started doing it, actually woke me up with the title, and kind of one of those type situations one morning, and I was like, okay, here we go. And so then I knew the direction and trajectory that He wanted me to go. But this power in family not only is a blessing for you and your nuclear family, but I'm telling you right now, it is the backbone of a nation. You probably don't realize this because we talk about, you know, the Hebrew people, the Jewish people, all these type of things and everything. You think that God came or God created everything to instill or create a religion. That isn't what God started. You realize when you get back in the Word and you deal with Abraham, what God came to do was build a nation. After the fall and everything in the garden, when He got with Abraham, He came and He presented Himself to build a nation. That nation, because God in the Garden of Eden, He was designing everything for family. And that's what He was doing as He built a nation. Nation is built upon family. I'm not going to get into all this today, but I'm going to throw you this out there. What's the first thing that God instilled when He brought forth a nation? He brought forth law. That was the first thing that God did. He presented the law, the moral law, to Moses on Mount Sinai, and He brought it to the people that He was forging a nation with. Why is that? Because that law became the boundaries that nets together and brings together what we call community. We come together and we follow a community of laws and constraints and things that we actually get from our Heavenly Father. And so, like I say, I'm not going that direction today that we'll all begin to, but I wanted to come out as I go through this series. But I wanted you to realize it's more than just the nuclear family that this all deals with. Because when the family falls, so too does the nation. And the family structure has been in a place of being destroyed for years upon years. And Satan understands this. As Christian men, as we're dealing with Father's Day today, and a lot of what I'm going to say, yes, it would pertain to, you have to always remember, when I'm dealing with this, I'm dealing from a biblical aspect about family, and today especially, but it'll be woven all through things, because you're going to see today the importance of men in the family and fathers. Because it all makes a difference, and I've got a fly bugging me. So, and if Sherry knows if there is one thing that is the devil to me, it's flies. And I cannot stand it. So, anyway, so this is truly going to drive me absolutely insane beyond your understanding or belief. So, but as Christian men in society today, and as I was trying to say before this fly, we'll call him Fred the fly, is driving me absolutely insane up here. There are always exceptions to every rule. And there have been many times when some moms have had to play role of father. Okay? I get all that. What I'm teaching from is a biblical aspect and to encourage men, to encourage fathers, because it is highly important. And you're going to, as I begin and we start unwrapping this, you're going to understand, you're going to begin to see the importance of a father and the importance of what God created in that. We have in our society today, because of our culture and the way it's twisted and the way that it's turned and everything else, men have no idea, especially Christian men. Sometimes in the world they just don't care, but as Christian men lack understanding to the idea of the magnitude of their impact and their influence and importance to the family structure. We have pushed it to the side and we've been convinced, really, to be honest with you, men really aren't needed so much anymore. Yep. And their importance has went down. And so we're going to deal with that. And so I entitled this today, Gentlemen, Start Your Engines. Now, I know many of you, when you saw that title and our thing, you thought, he's going to talk about NASCAR and all this. And oh, great, here I am. You know, you're one of the ladies going to, oh, great, here we go. We're going to talk about NASCAR. And that isn't the case, but there's a reason for this. And I know on Mother's Day, I kind of more did a relaxed, type thing and just had a fun day and some videos. We laughed. We had some that were tough and we cried together. Today, I really want, and I've always had a heart for men in ministry because I understand the magnitude of the creation of Father to the family. And I see and I understand, and when you look in society today, it's being destroyed. So why would this Gentleman Start Your Engines? It's because I want you to get ready. I want you to start that engine because you've sat in a car, and I'll have Chris put this up. When you talk about NASCAR, okay, here's my NASCAR part. Chris should have a picture of this. But when you look at this NASCAR, you're looking at under the hood of about 750 horsepower of just a raw, streamlined power source that does what? It produces power. And it brings what? It brings victory. That is what's lying under the hood, and God created you men the same way. God created you with that horsepower under the hood, and He created you as father. The word father is actually, a lot of times we think that it's Hebrew, but it's actually Aramaic. And the word that they use is Abba. And in the Greek, they use the word pater. But basically, and you get the sense when you look in the word, now we all think of father as dad and all of that, but a father, and when you think of God, because what I'm going to give you is a couple illustrations today, a couple things in the word. I'm going to give you the word, always give you the word, but so that you see this relationship between God the Father and God the Son. What God did was gave us a model of what a father is supposed to be and the importance of who he is in our lives. He modeled that through God and through Jesus. And so this means, and think of it in our Heavenly Father, He's the originator, He's a nourisher, He's a sustainer, right? Father is protector, He's a life giver. It's a powerful word, Abba. But Father is also, thinking of God now, but this also applies to us as men, Father is the foundation and the root of all things. That's how important you guys are, gentlemen. And those of you that end up watching, that is how important you are, because God gave the same term Father to you as He uses Himself. He created you with that same 750 horsepower under the hood, which are those attributes, that power that He gives you to act as men and to lead and be that root and to be that foundation. God gave you all these same qualities in the title of Father. Because when we do life, when we create humanity, right? God creates that definitely through us, but we are that Father under God with those same attributes. You were created to have that same character as Him, as originator, as protector, as nourisher. I know most times we think as the mother being the nourisher. But as I unwrap this and unfold this, that's a quality that a dad has too, that a father has and should have. God has given us that very call in our lives and designed us to be what? To be the foundation. God is the foundation of the world, of all of humanity and all of creation, everything that He has brought into this world. Tiffany, if we could get the clock going, please. And get everything going for us in foundations, in what we do. And how we are that root within the family and the structure of family. And how we minister to our families and the needs. Because fatherhood is dynamic. Fatherhood is a dynamic trait that God has specifically given to you, men. And it is a high, high responsibility. Satan, through the culture, has tried to destroy the role that God has given men as leaders, as fathers. He's tried to destroy that through all things. And see, what society labels you, if you are truly a man, and as we say, a man of God, but you believe in that structure of what I'm speaking about today, that's called toxic masculinity. Yeah. They view you as something toxic to the world and to the family. Because why? Because they have feminized men so much to bring them down from their place of esteem with God in the sense of leader, in the sense of family structure. And He's placed that in all of us. But the world has tried the feminization of our boys, teaching them to, you have to tap into that feminine side. And the extremes that we see now today, they even want you, they're even preaching, they're even ministering that it's okay for the man to look like and act like a woman. That's the world. That isn't God. That isn't the design of God, and that's what we're talking about today. We're at a level of depravity in society that it tells 8-year-olds, 10 years old, 12 years old, even younger, even older. It says, no, you can't buy cigarettes and you can't smoke. You can't drink alcohol, you can't buy alcohol. You can't even join the military, nope, too young. Nope, bars are out, strip clubs are out, regular clubs are out. Nope, you're too young for all that, you can't do that. And that's wrong on so many levels, right? See, that's the way the world looks at it, that's wrong. But that's the way, because those are moral things that we teach them. However, the world has twisted things to a place of depravity so much, now it's okay to drag them to drag queen events where you get these drag queens twerking in front of 8-year-olds, 10-year-olds, 12-year-olds. And if you don't believe me, that's fine. Look up a video. You'll find it. It is happening. All that other stuff's wrong, but this is okay. You see how everything's topsy-turvy and upside down. But now we can have that same 8-year-old, 10-year-old who can't enlist in the service, who can't go and buy cigarettes, who can't walk into an alcohol store, who can't do all those things, but yet they are mature enough to decide, hey, I want to cut off my genitals and I want to become a different sex. That's okay. Everything is so messed up. Our men, our boys, have been feminized, and that manly structure of leadership that God has given them has been cut away and has been turned away from them. Because society believes that they can counter and they know better than God in the way that He created things. One of the things that, and I'm just going to say is, men, we need to be and have that way that God has created us in being men. And I'm going to say something really weird. Men, you're not the head of your family. Yep. Now that sounds weird because word is like, wait a minute. But listen to me. You're not the head of the family. Why? Because there's always a neck that turns the head. What God has called you to be is the foundation to the family. He's called you to be that foundation that is rock solid, that holds the rest of the house and the family together. That is who He has called you to be. Yeah. He has called you to be that life-giving rock to your family. That's why He called you Father, is because you are a foundation, you are a root to your family. You are that representation of God, and you're supposed to be that representation of God to your family. You're supposed to be that caregiver, that provider, that nurturer within the confines of family. You're supposed to protect. You're supposed to set the culture for your family, not let the world do it. Quit worrying about wearing the pants and start worrying about the foundation that you're building the life of your family on. Why? Because men, your family doesn't need a boss. Your family needs a leader. Your family needs a leader to lead your family in right direction through the love of God and God changing and pouring into your heart. How many of you know here today, if anybody's ever built a family, yeah, we've built families, otherwise it wouldn't be Father's Day, but built a house. A house is only as good as its foundation that it's built upon. It doesn't matter if you have 5 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a formal dining room, a regular dining room. It doesn't matter if you have a jacuzzi. It doesn't matter if you have a chef's kitchen and everything's marble floors. If the foundation isn't any good, if it's cracked, if it's busted, and if it's falling apart, everything else in the house will fall eventually. Yeah. I don't care how much money you've spent on it. I don't care what it's worth. It does not matter if the foundation is ruined. If the foundation is compromised, then the rest of the house will fall. And that falls on us, guys. Yeah. That's us. That's our point. That's our place. It's those deep things that we need to keep our mind's eye on. Not the things that are the peripheral things of, slam the fist on the ground. If I don't have dinner at 6 o'clock every night, you're going to do this and you're going to... Guys, that's just trying to wear the pants. You realize how minuscule that is compared to my family is not going to partake upon these things because it is not right in the house of God. Which is more important? Right. The foundation is more important. We get tripped up in the world and we get tripped up with different things by the peripheral, all the things on the outside. Not only are you to be that foundation, you're to be a nourisher within your home. Let me explain that a little bit by telling a little bit of a story. My uncle was a farmer in Martinsville, and I'd drive up there, probably after I was about 16, I would go up on the weekends and I'd work on the farm. Farmers, as you know, they're dependent on God because they're dependent on the weather, on if crops are going to grow or not. And we all have those seasons of drought in the crops and in life. And sometimes the heavens will open up and it'll bless the farmers with just an abundance of rain, even coming on the backside of some droughtful times. And this was one of those times when I was hanging out up there with my uncle, and you can see the storms rolling in. My uncle comes back through the fields and he comes and gets me. And so we get out of there and we go up, and there's an awning over kind of the grain bins. And we kind of would park under there, and you'd watch the storms and the clouds roll in, the lightning begin to just pound and everything, and the thunder begin to roll. And we would just sit there silent, and we would watch the rain. And he probably had a couple thousand of acres of corn there. And we would just sit and watch it. And I'd swear to this day, and I know it was an optical illusion, I was a 16-year-old punk, but man, there's times I'd swear today you could see that water come down. You could see the corn stalks growing. I know it seemed like it, and I'm probably crazy for thinking that, but that's what it felt like. But it was growing because of this rain. But here's what I want you to understand. They weren't sitting there to where I could watch them grow that fast. However, a few days later, you would see the growth in the stalk from the rain that came down. But what you also have to realize is as the rain is coming and the winds are tumultuous and they're blowing the corn stalks over, almost bending them all the way over and everything, in just a few days they had all sprung back up. They sprung back up because of the water that was getting into where? It wasn't because of the water that was getting on the leaves of the corn stalks. It was because the water had penetrated down into the ground and it got into the root. It got into the root, and then the root did what? The root then dispersed the water up through the stalk of the corn and watered the rest of the plant, and it brought growth. Gentlemen, you are that root for your family. The Word of God should be pouring into your life, and you need to open that Word and allow it to saturate your life with the Word of the Spirit, which is also related to water, and allow it to minister into your life. Because then you take that nourishment and you begin to push that through who you are. And you pour that into your family, and your family grows, and your family moves forward. We are supposed to be that root. You see, if you've ever looked at any kind of plant, or you ever look at a corn stalk or anything else, if the root's bad or decayed, what happens? The plant dies. Or if it doesn't die, it's very compromised. That's what happens. Bad root, bad crop. As fathers, if we're a bad root, it produces bad crop. The root is always the source. Remember one of the things. Father is what? Father's the source. A father's the producer. A father's the one that's supposed to pour into their family. Has there been some drop the ball? Oh, yes. Have there been some not earn that title as father? Oh, yes. But here's the thing you have to understand. What pours out of you or doesn't pour out of you will have a long-term effect on the fruit that your family produces. And I'm going to look at some of these examples in the Word and look at that interaction with God and with Jesus as Father and Son as a model for you and for I as true biblical fathers and how we're supposed to be. I'm going to give you one first. In Ezekiel 18:2 it says, what do you mean by repeating this proverb concerning the land of Israel? The fathers have eaten sour grapes, and the children's teeth are set on edge. What is this talking about? What does this mean? It means you wonder why there's so much hurt in your life. There's so many problems. In so many cases, you're struggling in these problems and different things. Why? It's because what we see in the Scripture. See, the fathers were enjoying eating from the sour grapes. They were enjoying the pleasures of the world. They're enjoying the pleasures of everything else. And then what happens? And then it says the children's teeth were set on edge. The pain, the problems, the issues from the father getting his nourishment from the sour grapes, the things of the world, the problems of society and all of that. The children were then reaping what the father was sowing, is what the Scripture is dealing with. There's a scripture also in Exodus 3, 4, 6, and 34, 6, and 7. It says, the Lord passed before him and proclaimed, the Lord, a God merciful, gracious, slow to anger, and abounding in steadfast love and faithfulness. 34, 7. Keeping steadfast love for thousands, forgiving iniquity and transgressions and sin. Okay, that's what God does. He's a father. But who will by no means clear the guilty, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children and the children's children into the third and the fourth generations. Now, later on in Scripture, and I think in Jeremiah, and there's another place, I can't remember if it's in Ezekiel, where he says that the sons aren't responsible. In other words, they're not going to pay a penalty like death, because that's what the penalty was death. They're not going to pay that penalty because of the father, and the father's not going to because of the son. But what this is talking about is life application. It is saying and it is teaching you and it is showing you that what you do, the things you bring into your life, directly affect into the third and the fourth generations of your children, your children, your children's children, and all of that. It goes way back. Have you ever seen a family where the great-great-grandpa was an alcoholic, and the great-grandpa was an alcoholic, and the dad was an alcoholic, and then the kid was an alcoholic? That's what it's talking about. It's passed on. We don't realize the importance of father because those traits and those things that we do right now make a difference in their lives later. Look at Leviticus 26, 40 through 42. Here's God's grace. Here's the Father with His love and His mercy. But if they confess their iniquity and the iniquity of their fathers in their treachery that they committed against me, and also in walking contrary to me, so that I walked contrary to them and brought them into the land of their enemies, so he's talking about the penalty there. If then their uncircumcised heart is humbled, and they make amends of their iniquity, then I will remember my covenant with Jacob, and I will remember my covenant with Isaac, and my covenant with Abraham, and I will remember the land. He's pointing out that this stuff follows us. Why? Because you're the foundation. Because you are the root that is supposed to be bringing the nourishment to the family. Whether you like it or not, that's the way God designed it. Society tells men today, for the most part, you don't matter, other than a paycheck. Because society tells you, government will be your daddy. You don't need a father. Did you know, now this may surprise a lot of you, they've already created what they call embryo-like models without sperm and without egg. Just got this notification 2 days ago. They're trying to wipe out the family. This embryo that they've been able to design is the equivalent of 14 days of gestation with a real human embryo. That's where they've brought science, because science wants to be God. Science doesn't care about the family. Science doesn't care about men. We're doing everything we can to change what a man is. Yeah. And it's even happening today because man actually in his heart wants to be God. But God says, men, you make the difference. He placed that raw horsepower inside of you to nurture, love, produce, and everything for victory in the life of your family. You're that foundation. Let me give you some statistics to prove just how much you mean. About 63% of adult inmates come from fatherless homes. 75% of juvenile inmates come from fatherless homes. 70% of child murderers come from fatherless homes. 63% of youth suicides are from fatherless homes. 90% of all homeless and runaway children are from fatherless homes. 85% of children who show behavioral disorders come from fatherless homes. 80% of, I got to watch this on YouTube, I'll just give you the first two letters, you fill in the gap, we'll play that little game. 80% of RA, ends with ist, with anger problems come from fatherless homes. 71% of high school dropouts come from fatherless homes. 75% of adolescent patients in chemical abuse centers come from fatherless homes. And you don't think you make a difference, guys? You don't think that God has structured the family around you? Look at the magnitude of when men have been torn away and when men have pushed aside their responsibility as fathers. Look what happens in society. Remember what I told you. When the family breaks down from the foundation of what God has created and the world takes over, now you see the results. Because this isn't just about your nuclear family, your family. This is about a whole nation. This is about the destruction of a nation. Let me give you something else here. Ephesians 6:1-2. I'm going to prove another point to you because some of you are going to have a little bit of questions there as I'm going through some of this. 6:1, 6:2, Ephesians. Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. 2, honor your father and mother. This is the first commandment with purpose. Okay. Now, some of you will sit there and some of you go, well, my dad, my father, whatever, was a jerk. Pastor, you don't know what you're asking me. You know, I went through this with him, and he's this, and he's that. I want you, let's read these again. Children, number 1, children, obey your parents. Words matter. 2, honor your father and mother. Here's what I want you to get in this. Your father and your mother aren't necessarily your parents. How many have known those in their family circles like, I'll just say it how you hear it, okay, that's all I'm doing. He was just a sperm donor. Why? He's a father because he biologically fathered that child, but he's not a parent. Who's he say to obey? Obey your parents. Your parents are the ones that nurture you, who raise you, who are a foundation for you, who put their arms around you, who loved you when you were sick, who were there for you when everything around you was collapsing. That may not be your biological father. He says to honor your father and mother. That is just a position of respect because of the position they hold in being a father of creating you and bringing you into this world. But they're not necessarily your parent. See, we miss that. And we don't understand that. But you can have a parent who isn't a biological father. Some of you maybe been raised by grandparents, friends and families. They truly are your parent that loved you and nurtured you and gave all that. We have to get that understanding because a lot of this stuff that we thought is stinking thinking. And we have to understand what God's talking about here. Ephesians 6:3-4. And he goes on to tell him, and he tells him why. He says, that it may go well with you and that you may live long in the land. Now, he's attributing this to giving honor, respect to that father, that mother in your life who may not be your parent, but giving that respect for who they are. He says it does what? He says it's attached to long life. And then he says in Ephesians 4, do not provoke, he says, fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. How many times do fathers, have they done this? You got fathers that aren't around. Fathers that didn't hold that biblical line of what a father's supposed to be. How many of those kids grow up with massive amounts of anger inside of them? How many times do you have that parent that maybe, let me rephrase this, you have that father that's around, but they're really not a parent? You see, let me give you another bad example about provoking a kid to wrath. Is when that father sits there and says, don't you do this, but then they watch dad do that. How many times it kills? But you do it. See, that's part of provoking. That's part of getting the understanding of what he's talking about here, provoking them to wrath. Because then what happens is they go in those directions. They go in those broken places because of the foundation that we're laying. That is someone who's laying a bad foundation by provoking them to that place of lashing out and that wrath side of things. But God also gives us, He tells us that if we don't have a good father, maybe you didn't have a good role model as a father, He shows us, and it doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman, it doesn't matter, it's the same either way. Jesus gives you the answer to this problem. God uses His fathering of Jesus to show you a perfect model as to how we're supposed to be like Him. Look at the King James Version, Matthew 5:48. It says, be ye therefore perfect, even as your Father which is in heaven is perfect. Now, first thing we have to do, words matter once again. The word perfect, you and I think of, they do absolutely no wrong. That's your definition of my definition of perfect. However, the word here is teleos. What that word means is bringing something to completion, bringing it to a complete point, but the applications of it have to do with laboring in growth from a mental and moral standing. Big difference from your definition of perfect and what it's talking about here. All of the scriptures before this one here, it's talking about moral and ethical and all this mental growth and all of these things. And God is saying, that's who I am. And what he's telling them here is, hey, when things are sideways, when all these things are going wrong, you know who you rely on to show you who you are as a father? Look to me. Look to God. And that's what we're going to do. The first thing I want you to get, and I'm just going to give you two today. The first thing I want you to get, because these are huge. A father provides character to their children. A father provides and gives character. Look at John 6:46. He says, no one has seen the Father except the one who is from God. Only he has seen the Father. Talking about Jesus, this is that relation. You got the Father and you have the Son. He's seen the Father. Now, in John 8:19. Now this is where Jesus is having some discussions. There's some problems with the Pharisees, and they're coming against him and who he is and all these things. And they tell him, they say, in 8:19 it says, they said to him, therefore, this is after he's done the thing, woman adultery and all this. He says, where's your Father? This is what the Pharisee said to him. Where's your Father? Jesus answered, you know neither me nor my Father. If you knew me, you would know my Father. What is Jesus saying? What is the Son saying about the Father? He's saying that when you see me, you don't need to meet my Father. Why? Because everything that I am, because the character that he built inside of me and placed inside of me, you are seeing that. I am a reflection of my Father because my Father's character is in me. Why? Because what he's teaching you is the character of the Father shows up in the children. The character of the Father shows up in the children. You don't have to see the Father. Look at the children, and you'll see the character of the Father. Because, why? Remember what we've already talked about. It transfers. It goes down. It is ingrained into our kids. That's why you are so important, men. A good father is always conscious as to what he is creating and instilling and the legacy that he is teaching and leaving within his children, because that is what happens. We do what our fathers do. I know there's many men that are watching this today. Many that are probably sitting here today would say, I don't want to be like my dad. Yeah. You don't want your kids to say that about you. But how many times do you find, even at times when we don't want it, we still end up doing it? We still end up saying those little things our dad used to say. You remember that? Or I'll never be like my dad. He was da-da-da-da-da. And then later on in life, you find out you're just like him. You say the same things. You do the same things. Why? Because the Father instills and brings character into the life of the kids. Because why? Because you are important, men. You are extremely important. In John 8:39 through 44, this is where the Pharisees are wanting to kill Jesus here. He says, they answered him, Abraham is our father. And Jesus said to them, if you were Abraham's children, you'd be doing the works Abraham did. But now you seek to kill me, a man who has told you the truth that I heard from God. You're hearing the truth who I heard from my father. He says, this isn't what Abraham did. In other words, trying to kill Jesus. He says, you're doing the works your father did. They said to him, we're not born of sexual immorality. We have one Father, even God. You know what he's alluding to here? Let me take you back to Jesus' beginning. What they're alluding to, they're punching at Jesus. Because if you remember, Joseph just about put Mary away. Why? Because the whispers and because of his worries and everything else was that Mary had slept with someone else and became impregnant with Jesus. And it wasn't his father. That's what they're talking about here. They're taking him all the way back to Jesus began, and they're ridiculing him. They're saying, yeah, but at least we weren't born into sexual immorality, because they believed not that God was his father. They didn't believe that Joseph was his father. They believed in the sexual immorality. These were the Pharisees. Remember the Pharisees? These are the religious folk. So that's what's going on there. And he goes on. Jesus said to them, if God were your father, you would love me. For I came from God, and I am here. I came not of my own accord, but he that sent me. Why do you not understand what I say? Is it because you cannot bear to hear my word? Now listen. You are of your father, the devil, and your will is to do your father's desires. Remember, the father is entrusted by God to build character and pour into the child. And then they act accordingly, and they act just like him. And what is he telling them? Then he goes on to tell them who their father is. He was a murderer from the beginning and does not stand in truth because there is no truth in him. When he lies, he speaks out of what? His own character. For he is a liar and the father of lies. Gentlemen, you are responsible for the character that your children end up producing. You're seeing that in the Father and the Son right here in what Jesus is teaching and what he is saying. They're claiming that Abraham's their father. And he's saying, no, he isn't your father. Your father's the devil. You claim to be like Abraham, but you're not. You're acting like Satan. Why? Because fathers produce character in the lives of their children. You show me a respectful child, and I'll show you children who have a father that has instilled through his actions and through his words respectful teaching and how to grow up that way. Folks, it's right there in the Word. It's right there in seeing how God deals with Jesus and what Jesus says about him. So I encourage all of you men, I know you're all adults, and those watching, you're all adults. Have someone in your life that you can look up to. You think, man, yeah, I missed the whole boat on all that. My dad was this and this and that. Find somebody in your life. I encourage you, find someone in your life that you can look up to. And that can change some of those character flaws. That can help you to make some better decisions in life. Somebody who can mentor you. It doesn't matter how old you are. Or maybe you can be a mentor to someone else and teach them those ways. It's important. What did Paul say in 1 Corinthians here, 11:1? He says, be imitators of me as I am of Christ. Not imitators as in do something fake. What he is saying is look, what Paul's actually saying is, on earthly means, I'll be your spiritual father. Imitate me. Because I'm imitating Christ. I'm being like my Father. And instead of you being like your father, the devil, just be like me. Imitate me. Not from a fake standpoint. You got to get that. It's not about faking God out. You're not going to. But it's imitating in the sense of bringing those things into your life that begins to build that character. Jesus is telling them that they do the things that their father does. Why? Because that's what children do. Especially like with sons. Now daughters have a really unique thing about their daddies. They really do. But like with sons, gentlemen especially, I'll tell on Alyssa actually. Didn't have any sons, so I had daughters. I would come in off the road when I was driving a semi. I would come in off the road, and I'd come in. The first thing I would do is, man, it's hot or whatever in the summer, so I'd take my shirt off, throw it somewhere. Yeah, I'm that guy that all of you ladies can't stand. But I'd throw that shirt somewhere. I'd sit there in my easy chair, glass of tea, and just chilled out. Alyssa had to run to the bed. You can see her. There she goes. Dad gets home. I come in. Shirt goes. Sherry grabbed me a glass of tea. Alyssa goes running to the bedroom. What do you think happened? Puts her shorts on, takes her shirt off, and runs out and jumps in my lap in the chair. Why? Because she was imitating her father. Why? She wanted to be like her father. Your kids want to be like you. I will guarantee you there are actions and things you do and things you say, or maybe you're going along. There are times when I'll watch Baji, and it could be in church, it could be doing whatever, and you'll see if I'm doing something, or maybe even preaching, doing something, you watch, and Baji will start doing it. He will start imitating. Why? Because they want to be like us. And I'll tell you this, God has shown us through Christ, and He's shown us through His teachings, what? He's shown us that our children want to be like the Father. Jesus was He's the Son wanting to be like the Father, and to be the Father, right? So that He shows us through the Word that it's our job to create in our children for them to be like us. Now some go, oh, wow, oh, no, man, my father, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, that's the point. So you better be something worth making your child into.
That's good.
It's about you and your connection with God, because you are the one, remember the root, you are the one that is feeding the rest of the plant. You're the one that's feeding the rest of the family. Fathers also cultivate their children and teach and train their children through their words and through their actions. I'll talk about the words today. The power of the father to speak words of life into your children is huge, because it affects your children for a lifetime, guys. Let's go to this one. You ever wonder why? Now granted, there's always other influences, I get it. But we're talking biblical here. You ever wonder why so many times kids curse so much? Because they're imitating their fathers. They're imitating. Where do you think they learned it? It's because your words matter. Your actions matter. Because what have we all said? These little kids are sponges. Because why? Because God has instilled something in them to want to be like their father. And from an earthly aspect, it's you. And then you want to be like your father, who's Him. Who then pours and gets nourished by Him, so you can take that nourishment and pour back into your kids. He repeats the process. All you have to do, not all the time, there's other influences, school and everything else, I get it. But here's the thing you got to think of. Well, my kid, we don't do that at home. They get that at school. Where are they getting it? It all comes back to family. It all comes back to environment and exposure. So they get it somewhere else, so then it's poured into your family. So it is about home environment and what we pour into these little ones. Gentlemen, you had no clue coming in here today just how important you were, that God says you are, to your family. Here's a question. This is the question I can leave you with to ask yourself this. And then I'm going to prove it. When you go to Walmart, or let's just say church, you go to church, do you want your kids repeating what they hear you say at home? Ask yourself that. If not, then you got to ask yourself why. But then also, the other side to that is, that's probably how you grew up. Why? Because it passes down and passes down and passes down. It's all biblical. Look at this, John 8:28. So Jesus said to them, when you have lifted up the Son of Man, then you will know that I am He, and that I do nothing on my own authority, but speak just as the Father taught me. Wow. And that's what kids do. That's what kids do. In other words, Jesus is telling them a good father puts good words and puts good thoughts and different things in the mouths of his children to grow them, to nurture, because you are the nurturer. So many times I've heard my girls, they'll pop something off, and it's something that I would say. Why? Because it is instilled and it's ingrained in them, because they watch what the fathers do. In John 12:48, 49, I'm just about done here. 48 says, the one who rejects me and does not receive my words as his judge, the word that I have spoken will judge him on the last day. For I have not spoken on my own authority, but the Father who sent me has himself given me a commandment, what to say and what to speak. This is Jesus. This is Jesus, a grown man. At this point, he's approximately about 31 years old, and he's saying, I still don't even have my own words, because I'm still speaking the words of the Father. The words that the Father has instilled in me, because He is the ultimate root. He's the root that has given me my nourishment. He's the root that is pouring into me. He is the root that's pouring into me so I can pour out into you, because you're all my children. You're all my family. And I want you to do as the Father does. And that's what He's trying to teach us here. And folks, it doesn't matter, negative or positive, you will produce in your children what comes out of your mouth and what comes out of your actions. If your father is a man of faith, a man of hope, a man of good influence, guess what? You're going to have those same characteristics and aspects and attributes grow up in your children. If their exposure is everything rotten and everything negative, and oh, I'm always the victim, and oh, everybody's always against me, and oh, I can't do anything, and oh, everybody this, and everybody that, and they're just sit around, and they sit at home all day, and they never work, and they just sit and drink, and make sure that, they get downtown to get their weed and everything else. What do you think they're pouring into their children through their actions and through their words? And God is showing us that the children will follow that. We've seen it in the statistics of fatherless homes. I encourage all of you fathers here today, and grandfathers, and those that are watching, give your children faith words. Give your children faith words, not curse words. Yeah. Give your children hope. Give your children a sense of love. Give your children a sense that they matter. Don't give them words that defeat and tear down, because you know what? There's coming a day that it matters. When they go off to school, when they go off to the workplace, when they start a family and all those things, that's when what you do now, if you're a young father, that's when what you do now will show up and matter then, because they're going to pour that into their family. Yeah. It happens. I hope that this Father's Day message, as I begin to go into a series on the power of the family, I hope it encourages you and not discourages you. I hope it encourages you to realize that, gentlemen, start your engines means that this is a starting point. Maybe you've done it your whole life. Maybe you've been blessed with a family that is like these things that I'm teaching you now, but maybe you weren't. And guess what? The majority haven't lived that life. But I don't want you to give up. I don't want you to give in. I want you to be encouraged. That you have that same 750 horsepower revved up engine that will take you to victory, and that's none other than Jesus in your life. That's none other than being the father that He's called you to be, and it will make a difference in your life. It'll make a difference in your family's life, and it will change everything. Just because you haven't had it for the last 20 years, the last 30 years, the last 40 years, does not mean you can't start the car now.
Yeah.
I don't care what NASCAR driver it is. He can go up on the starting line and get ready to start the race, but if he never hits the button to start the engine, he's not going anywhere.
Yeah.
It is never too late to give power to the horsepower under the hood and generate that for your family. Because God has given you the foundational tools through His Word so that you can properly build your house. So that it's a house on a firm foundation that doesn't collapse when the winds of the storm hit it. That doesn't collapse when you lose your job. That doesn't collapse when you and the spouse aren't getting along. That doesn't collapse when your kid does something you wish they wouldn't have done, but they've done, and you didn't teach them that, but they did it anyway, and they got influenced a certain way. That the house doesn't collapse because it's built on a firm foundation, and you've been that foundation. And you've motivated and moved your family in that direction. And I want to tell you today, don't listen to Satan, because what Satan will talk to you and tell you in your mind is all the could have, should have, and would have. All that is to do is to discourage you and defeat you from ever getting into that car with that engine and starting it up and get off the starting line and start moving your family towards the finish line. And if we do that, and if you follow a lot of these principles that I'm taking the time to go through, I will tell you this. Just get in, buckle up, start the engine, and get ready for the ride of your life, and hold on, because God can and will take your family in a direction and in places you could have never imagined that He would bless into your life and into your family. And He will change you, and He will help you to change your family. Because that is the Father that we serve. And that's the Father that He's created you to be.